So let's continue playing with our learning servlet now that we've learned a little bit about EL, and in the EL slides we heard the claim that it's hard to access an inner object from a property. So here we're setting an address, which is just a string. So our person object has an address that's a string. Let's change this over to an address object. So I already whipped up an address class, and it's very simple. It has a street and a zip, getters and setters. So I change the type here, and I'll just patch this up, generate the getters and setters for us, and this should be broken, and we're going to fix it. So again, we're just setting an actual address object instead of a string. So let's just set the zip. Alright. And over in our JSP, let's just run it and make sure that things are working as we might expect. So let's see, can we do a run as right from here and bring the JSP up? Probably not. We'll just correct the URL. Alright, so our JSP is working as normal, and what we might try to do to continue using our JSP actions, the get property, would be to say, well, let me get the address object, or the address property, which happens to be an object, as we see. It's printing out the hash code of the address, which is just a toString. So if the address had a nice toString that we wanted to use, that would work. But what if we just wanted to get the zip? Could we do something like that? Turns out no. So it's trying to get a property called address.zip. It doesn't recognize the dot as a separator. Well, EL does. So let's comment this out. And let's use some EL here. And let's see what we're getting. Alright, cool. So we got the address. Let's drop this in split it up so visually. So we're getting the zip code using this expression here. Now let's look at a couple more aspects of this. This is just pumping out whatever this variable holds onto the page. So what if we grab, in addition to the zip code, the street? And well, that's interesting. We might have expected it to be null, but it's actually handling nulls quite nicely for us in that it's not printing out anything. Now, let's say that we weren't hard coding all of these values in here, but we were getting them from a database. So we would, set street1 to something from the database, and maybe we have a malicious user on our site that put in a link to a bad site. With some attractive click here verbiage that will lure someone to that bad site, or they might put some JavaScript on there that steals someone's cookie. Let's see what happens. So that redeployed in the background. So that click here just comes right up, and it offers to send us to a bad site. So obviously we could sanitize that coming on the way in, and that would be a good thing to do. But let's start to use our JSTL to our advantage. So let's wrap this in a cout and see what happens. So if street1 is not supposed to contain any HTML, maybe we can sanitize it. Now I'm going to get an error here. That's a really tricky mistake. So do you know what's happening? So that just disappeared. Now did it sanitize it for me and clean up my site for me? No. It actually just failed to interpret the cout. So what do we have to get? What do we have to do to get our JSTL working, we've got to set up a directive up here to bring in the tag library. And I'm just going to copy and paste that since it's got a big ugly URI in there. So this should bring in the tag library if the tag library is present. So it's telling us right now it can't find the tag lib. So let's copy the jar file into the lib directory. And that's probably still not enough. And we should set the build path at a jar. And see if it redeploys. Let's just trigger. Alright, let's just punch in our servlet. And there we go. So that is actually escaping all of the HTML for us. So whereas beforehand, when we just put this on the page by itself, and it was rendered as HTML, this is escaping the angle brackets, translating all of those characters, so that we have sort of a safe version, so that the content that's coming out isn't going to be interpreted as HTML. Now we could still use a cout and disable that. Let's see if we can figure that out. And it's escape XML equals false. I'll just refresh on the source, and now both are printing out the same thing. So this is just sort of an expensive cout that these two are doing the same thing. All right, let's play around a little bit more with the JSTL. So let's do some looping. So we can set up a for each with a body, and that'll do something. So maybe we have some HTML in a list, and we want to iterate over some items and print out a list item for each of those items that we are generating. So the for each, I think we require all of these. So we could begin at one, we could end, and this information could be coming from our objects. We could put JSTL expressions in here. So this is sort of like a somewhat fancier for loop that lets us set the step size instead of writing a traditional for loop in a scriptlet. Let's see how far this gets us. So there we go. We got 20 highs. Let's do a little more and get a variable. So this sets a counter variable. So in a for loop, you might have a for I equals this, and you might use the I inside of the for loop. Here, we might use the status variable. And do something with that.